as you know, we're in a long legislative session, and the Capitol is closed. And there's a lot of stuff happening that's going to impact business, and folks don't really know how to engage. And there's a really actually very cool system that you can use to engage, but most people don't know how to get in the front door with it. So we are here today with Josh Tompkins, who's with Dick's Auto Group, and with Andy Smith, who's with the City of Hillsboro. They're going to take you on a virtual tour of how you can amplify your engagement with state legislators. So Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Deanna. Thanks everybody for being here. Again, Josh Tompkins, Dick's Auto Group. I'm currently the chair of the Public Policy Committee for the Hillsboro Chamber, and I sit on the Political Action Committee as well. I've been involved with the Chamber in these two ways for going on 3 years, maybe a little bit more than that. So part of this is going to be going over, my piece at least will be going over how to get involved maybe through the Chamber or other trade organization type of lenses and some other stuff. And then Andy's going to go through the OLIS system with us to show you how to check out bills and track committee meetings and everything during the legislative session, which is very handy to stay on top of all this stuff. So I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Great. Can everybody see the PowerPoint advocating for your business and accessing legislators? I went with the very fanciest PowerPoint design I could find, so please don't be too shocked by how good looking this is. But essentially, this is all about just as a business owner or someone in the business community, what's the best way to talk to our state, local, federal, even very, very local, the city council, Washington County commissioners, that sort of thing, on up through the state level, through a couple of different avenues. So let's go ahead and get started. I think. So just very briefly off of the top, and I made this thing to be a little bit light. So pulling back the curtain on how to interact with legislators, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that they're just normal people. Just because they've achieved elected office at some level doesn't mean that this is a famous person or somebody that you can't access, or really that they're not there to help their constituents, the people in their districts, whatever that may be, have their voice heard, whether that be locally here in Washington County or Hillsboro, at the state level in Salem, and maybe even at a federal level to varying degrees of effectiveness, which we're going to go through. So, I start here with what's the point of this whole thing? Elected officials operate best when they're provided with feedback from their constituents. I was taught a long time ago in a former life, working more directly in politics, that it's good to keep these stories factual, statistical, historical, and most of all personal. Just you have things that are happening to your business, and you're affected in a lot of different ways. Obviously, COVID is the biggest way we're facing right now in the country and the world. And when you're interacting with legislators, it's important to keep your message succinct and topical and that sort of stuff. So who are these people? The size of the government abounds. The government is everywhere. That means people that work for and were elected to the government are all over the place. You can find most of them by Googling. A quick Google search, you can find who your legislator is and how to contact them. So I didn't go into any of that here. But it's all about first determining where you want your message to go. Is it federal? Is it to the state level? Is it here in Washington County, Hillsboro? Are you looking for the dog catcher to tell them a story about, what your street should be like, which is a joke, but just showing sort of the scope of who's available to you. Do they care? Yeah, they do. They're there to care. And by and large, building a relationship or even just having access to a local legislator, they're there to care about your story, your factual, statistical, historical, and personal story, and see if they can't help find a solution for you or your industry. How do I reach them? there are a lot of ways to get a hold of these folks, which is most of what I'm going to go through here this morning. And also that some ways to access legislators are better than others. So I think, you know, since we're here with the small business group operating through the chamber, I wanted to touch on how to use your business voice to talk to legislators. So one of the best ways, and especially here in Hillsboro, is the Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, Deanna and her team and the volunteer leaders, some of whom are on this call today, have a lot of experience, not only you know, effectively interfacing with legislators to get our message heard, our legislative priorities heard, but also bringing legislators close to the chamber and close to chamber members when in a non-COVID, you know, scenario, when the world is normal, is a face-to-face opportunity for members to talk to their legislators. One of the best ways to get involved through the Chamber of Commerce is to look for a committee. This committee that Brad runs, the Small Business Committee, is a great way to start building your business voice and talking about issues, and making sure that everybody's sort of on top of what's happening here in Hillsboro and Washington County. But also the Public Policy Committee that I'm lucky enough to chair currently is a great place where we develop those legislative priorities and figure out which conduit we're going to use to direct that to Salem, to the county commissioners, to the city council, just to make sure that the business voice is heard. I think it's every January for sure, and I think we've done some in the fall in recent years. But the chamber hosts legislative receptions. The first few that I went to were obviously in person, where, you know, we had 4, 5, 6 of our local folks, you know, from all over Washington County in different offices. So state representatives, but also state senators who come and sort of share their perspective on, first of all, what their priorities are for, you know, an upcoming legislative session. If the reception is a January event, they're going to talk about, you know, what's on the docket, maybe what their caucus is really focusing on, the key legislation that they want to address during the session. And also, it varies from legislator to legislators. Some have a background in education. We have a few folks here in Washington County that fit that bill. Some come from a police background, like Rep. Noble down in McMinnville. So some come from small business. So everybody's sort of got pet issues, but there is an overarching theme going into session every time. And legislative receptions are a good chance to not only hear what's on the docket, but also talk about, you know, what should be on the docket, what your business is facing, and send that home to the legislators so they can take it to Salem and hopefully impact legislation. There was, through the chamber, a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, we did a day at the Capitol. I was lucky enough to attend. Senator Betsy Johnson joined us for a really enlightening question and answer period. But that's, you know, going basically to the home turf down at the Salem Capitol, at the Oregon Capitol in Salem, and having legislators come meet a group, talk in sort of more of an intimate setting about issues and maybe what's even just happening that day. I think one of the best things, you know, to take away from a day at the Capitol is it's sort of like I put on my first slide, it sort of pulls back the curtain on what's actually happening, that this isn't just sort of some sort of impossible to understand undertaking that's happening in a town, you know, 60 miles down the road from here that we don't have access to. You can go in. There are legislative days for everybody. There are a bunch of different ways to listen to committees address issues, hearings on bills, etc. So it really sort of, if you're interested in being part of the process, this is a great way to just sort of demystify it. And also, you know, currently Deanna serves as essentially the lead for government affairs and public policy for the chamber. And she has a ton of experience working not only with legislators, but on issues for the business community here. So a valuable resource there. On top of the Chamber of Commerce option, there are trade associations and business advocacy organizations pretty much for everybody. If you have, you know, a flower shop, there's probably an association for you. either on a national level, maybe there's some here on the state level. But again, the best way to think of those is just sort of a conduit. They're going to know about your issues from federal government on down and help you sort of get your message to the right people through those organizations. Some of them have lobbyists that are paid staff federally, some here in the state, who are down in Salem every day, and it's their job to make sure that these issues stay in front of legislators. Again, I want to go back to personalizing your message when talking to legislators or sending it however, through whatever conduit, once again, that you see fit. So developing your message, is your message helpful and is it timely? How exactly does it impact your business? And better yet, how exactly does it impact your industry? A singular business story, maybe with a very specific problem, that's occurring to their shop specifically, isn't going to be quite as impactful as maybe like I'm in the auto business. We're facing a lot of privilege taxes and unemployment taxes, just like everybody else is. Our scale's a little bit bigger. And we can also, sort of get feedback from other people in our industry to show that it's not just me, Josh, who's mad about something happening in my shop, but it's us in, the whole western part in Washington County who are dealing with, the corporate activities tax. We even had a privilege tax put on every vehicle that we sell about 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. I can't quite remember that. Essentially we have to just keep passing along to the consumer as it works. And our legislators need to know that. So if you can make your message a little bit bigger than just, I'm having a hard time, that's very helpful. Again, how big is your issue? Is it a federal issue? You can write your senator or congressperson. You can send an email that will go to a specific inbox for them. And you probably will get a form letter back that says, essentially, we see you, we hear you, we're sorry that's happening, but we're working on it. And then as you sort of, tighten the focus on that to the state level, where again, here in Washington County, we're really lucky to have elected officials who are tapped in, especially through the Chamber of Commerce, who stay close to our business issues. And quite honestly, party affiliation matters less than messaging and being able to tie it to the community that elected official represents. Which brings me to the stay on point bullet point there. Your story is important. Don't let it get lost. A lot of times partisan politics come into play in a way that make your message, even if it's if you're really suffering from it, or if it's really impactful to your business or industry, don't let it get lost just because your representative might not see your politics the same way, or be into the same politics as you. One of the things I learned a couple of years ago through a planning session with the chamber here is the term partisan pro-economy, which I think is a really cool way to that through the lens of the Chamber of Commerce and other trade organizations, lets you keep your message nonpartisan and very specific to your business or industry. So keep that in mind. Your elected official may not be somebody you voted for, but you still can access them in a meaningful way and have your message heard if you're just professional and personal about it. And also, as I'm going through this, I can't really see anybody, but if you want to, if you have a question, or Deanna, if you see them, I'm happy to do that in the middle of it all. As far as submitting testimony on any legislation, this is something that Andy Smith is going to go over in more detail here with the Oregon Legislative Information System. So this is OLIS. This was one of the two main topics for today's meeting. But this is where in the state of Oregon, you can track bills, you can figure out, is it Senate Bill 127? Is it House Bill? Where is it in the process? Has it had its first hearing in committee? Did it make it through committee? Are they actually going to vote on it? Did it get knocked down and replaced by something? Every day at the Capitol, there's you know, a lot of horse trading going on where, you know, your bill dies as long as you jump onto this one and you have to vote for this one, then I'll vote for that. So it's a good way to just keep track. You can check it every day. It's updated every single day with all committee hearings, what bills are going to be where. And that's also a good place to find your legislators. So the testimony process, so a bill has to be scheduled for hearing before you can register for testimony, which means a bill will be introduced, or maybe at a chamber legislative reception, you will have heard like, well, Senate Bill 367 is the one. That's the, you know, corporate activities tax or whatever it might be. So that's, you know, the idea. And as the formal session gets started, that bill will be introduced and it will then be scheduled for hearing. Again, it's something you can find out on OLIS. And then you can register to testify. So essentially there are two ways to do it. Verbal and written. You can, at this point, what we do is, you know, you register and then you call in on a big conference call. Whatever committee it's in will have rules about, you know, how long you can testify. Sometimes it's 30 seconds, maybe it's a little bit longer depending on how many folks are trying to do it. But this is a good opportunity to hear other people in your industry. Maybe if you don't have a good idea of how this is affecting people in Medford or Bend or Eugene or whatever, maybe even just across the Portland Metro in Clackamas County, you'll get a better idea for who cares about the same things that you do. Maybe get hear a better way to build your messaging, maybe not for testimony, but as you're talking to legislators. And it gives you a concept of how big this issue might be. The other option is written testimony. We've done this a lot. Well, we've done both through the Chamber of Commerce as recent as last session, but you can also submit written testimony in the same way. The why of it all, this is the one way to get your story and your voice on the official record so that it never goes away from there. So as you can imagine, you've got a big issue, you register to testify, and whether you do it on the phone or written, all of it, you know, goes in a big pile. And sometimes when that pile's big enough, that's when legislators will really start to listen to that issue. A great place to start, again, is not just OLIS, but OregonLegislature.gov is actually a pretty efficient and effective website for a government website to help navigate this process. Another way that we've operated through the chamber, and I've had experience through other trade organizations, is through a product called Voter Voice, which is essentially online grassroots advocacy. Voter Voice does a few things really well. It can help a large group, let's say all the members of the Chamber of Commerce. The legislative priority is that there's a tax coming down the line that is going to affect everybody here in Washington County. And maybe, you know, through the Chamber of Commerce, we can show people how to use Voter Voice, which is essentially a form letter linked to all of the legislators in a specific area that is determined essentially by your address. What people do is go in, put their name in, where do they live? That zip code ties them to whoever their state reps and senators are. And the form letter will say, you know, to whom it may concern. You're free to alter these letters if you want to, but you don't necessarily have to. You know, it's a to whom it may concern. I'm a resident of Washington County. We understand that Senate Bill yada, yada, yada is going to impact us this way. We're very concerned about the business community and how this impacts our ability to, you know, serve the community in this way. Put your information in there. It looks like it came from you specifically. Hit send, it goes directly to your legislators. When it gets to your legislators is a little bit of a different story. This is kind of the same concept of submitting testimony, right? Where a critical mass of these voter voice emails, while they all might say the same thing, and pretty much do say the same thing, getting a couple emails from concerned constituents is one thing, and most legislators do a good job of responding, or a staff person does. If there's a huge amount of outcry on a specific issue, legislators are going to see hundreds of these maybe in their inbox. So they'll know that when it comes time to vote for whichever bill is the issue for the business community, they'll know that they've heard from a lot of people. So this is, I put there, mobilizing 1,000 voices. This is a good way to just sort of, like I said, create a critical mass of information on one topic, so that a legislator is more likely to, keep an eye out for what's next, or really dig into an issue. Maybe it's just a small part of the bill that really affects the auto industry, and the auto industry came out strong against it, so they can actually look at it. Again, it's easy access for constituents. It's easy to take part in. I know the state chamber does a lot of voter voice stuff. You'll see this a lot through national organizations as well, but it is a pretty darn effective tool if it's used right on a local level. So finally, I'm going to start at the bottom here. This quote is often attributed to our founder here at Dick's Auto Group, Dick Inukai, but I'm sure it's a quote that's been around forever. But he used to say, they don't have a reason to care until they know you do first. So a legislator can operate sort of in a void if they're not told what to do. That's sort of, they'll tend to go down party lines more often. They can detach from their community if they don't hear from their community. So focusing your message and figuring out the conduit to access these folks is extremely important, because if you don't tell them, they don't care, or they don't know is a better way to put it. They care, but you can't care about something you don't know about. Obviously, we send a message with how we vote for state reps every 2, for Senate every 4 in the state of Oregon. So they will hear that message, but as far as anything specific pertaining to your business, if you don't reach out and you don't get involved, they just don't know you're out there. So a few great ways to get involved outside of just maybe the chamber or business organizations. You can run for something. It doesn't take much, just a few, filings with the Secretary of State and a little bit of support, and you can run for city council. You can run for Washington County Commissioner. You can run for state representative. You can volunteer on a campaign for somebody that is running. Every 2 years, even right now, we're looking at campaigns ramping up in Washington County for a lot of different things, and for a lot of really good reasons that if you look, you can probably find a reason to get involved. Again, you can go to a hearing, you can go to a city council meeting, you can go check in on the Washington County Commission. You can hear online pretty much anything across the state at this point. And it's a great way to build context around some issues and maybe build some relationships that way. On top of that, join committees, join the chamber, and then join the public policy committee maybe. Go to events such as the legislative receptions. And again, it's not just the chamber. There are a handful of organizations here in Washington County that you can find that might be helpful on your issue. And, dollar for dollars, there are just a million different ways to get involved on a campaign or just with a legislator at a lot of different levels. So at this point, if there are any questions, does anybody have any questions on any and all of that before we move along? Yeah, Brad.
So what is your recommendation, Josh, for the happy medium? If you email your rep or your senator and you get the bounce back, hey, thank you for we got your email, basically generic, and you haven't heard anything, what do you become the squeaky wheel? Is that beneficial, or when do you become annoying and they become, do you keep sending weekly emails till you actually get a response? Or I know in the past I've emailed legislators and some of them respond with that generic email next day, and some of them I've gotten responses like a month and a half, 2 months, 3 months later with the generic response. So I just don't know, if you're sitting there waiting, should you keep harassing, or is that going to hurt your cause?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say this: if we're talking about something like voter voice, where it's a form letter, you're attaching your name to it and it's going to your specific elected officials, that's one way. I mean, eventually your name might become so common in their inbox that it gets noticed. But the best way to approach this, in my opinion, is to sort of take a cross section of everything that I just talked about. Voter Voice is one pretty simple, easy to use way, but the best way to do it is come to the next legislative reception, maybe put a face to a name, maybe let a legislator know, hey, I've really been passionate about this issue. I've sent you a couple of emails, and maybe it's a good time to say thank you for responding, even if it's just a form letter, and start a relationship that way. And the other point I want to go back to here is, I think the squeaky wheel, or you mentioned when do you get annoying? I think you lose traction and become quote unquote annoying when you start to bring politics into it that might just muddy the waters in any sort of conversation to get something done. Again, stay on point with messaging. You have a specific issue. Your business needs something solved to keep going in the way that you want it to go. And that's all we're talking about here. We're all trying to be helpful. We know that you're elected to help me. I'm here to have my voice heard, and ultimately I'm here for my business to succeed. So how can we sort of square that circle? But I think it's, you know, it's a cross section of all these is the best way to do it, in my opinion.
Hey, Josh, just to chime in. Hi, Betty. I know the Janine, I noticed this morning, Janine Solomon, our state rep for some people in the Hillsboro area and Banks, is having a listening session on Friday. And a lot of our state representatives do a great job of having that. So another place besides waiting for the next legislative reception is look at your representatives and see if they host office hours or listening sessions or town halls where you can have your voice heard or make that in-person connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's one that I missed, but that's a great point. Legislators want you to subscribe to their blog and email list and everything that they have. So, you know, in 15 minutes, you can be on every mailing list for every legislator that, you know, you're a constituent of, and find out if they're having a coffee talk on Saturday morning with a small group. That's also a great way, Elizabeth, because the groups are smaller, it's more intimate, it's more, oftentimes more direct to specific issues. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Josh, I would also just add that the chamber has just organized a March 19th from noon to 1:15 with Rep. Solomon and Rep. McLean to have a business town hall. Oftentimes these town halls that happen on the weekends are filled with, have a lot of other constituent issues. And so we really wanted to have a session where we could really talk about, from a business perspective, what's happening during the session, and give some feedback on some bills that we're watching carefully. So we'll be doing that throughout the session. And again, Fridays are a good time because they're back up in district. They're not, their committees don't meet during that time. So we'll be doing that more frequently as well. Also just wanted to add in, if I could, I know that sometimes people get discouraged and they think, you know, my voice doesn't matter, it won't count. Why would I go to this work? And hopefully you've all received in your inbox about Business Oregon's commercial property owner relief package, and that's just opened up. And I just want to put my friend Brad Smith on the hot seat here to really talk about how that happened, because I really give him and the group that we pulled together all the credit for getting $100 million for commercial property tax or property relief. Brad, that's your cue.
Yeah, it works, believe me. And I would just say, our company's been members of the Chamber of Commerce for a long time, and it was always just, that's what you do. It legitimizes your business. You got the sticker on your front door. And then I got involved probably, I don't know, 3 years ago, maybe, and not even that. And then got more and more and more involved and got sucked in and started actually doing stuff. And, you know, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, we went from 6-8 months ago of having no idea how this pandemic, we were going to get through it as property owners, to brainstorming ideas and getting them, you know, getting the landlord fund through. We got the commercial fund through, not just us, but our voice helped get those through. And now there's talk of a tax credit that's in a bill form right now that's I testified on yesterday, and we're trying to push that through. So, you know, one tiny small business can make a difference, and it's just, you just got to be persistent and keep talking. So, and also Deanna was very instrumental of when, you know, I started crying the blues. She said, well, let's do something about it. Let's let our legislators know. And so, you know, it definitely works. So.
Brett, I would add on top of that, just in conjunction with the March 19th event with Representatives McClain and Solomon, and then Brad, you saying it works. I'd just like to say, these are two state representatives who are in, you know, third-ish terms, second and third-ish terms. So they're experienced at this point. I don't think either of them came to that state representative position as business advocates. But at this point, whenever a business issue comes across their desk, they call Deanna, they reach out to the Chamber of Commerce, they interface with the Public Policy Committee and at legislative receptions and a lot of members. And we're slowly but surely opening eyes to how important maybe whatever your political affiliation or your issues that matter to you weren't small business or the business community, but they're now realizing how important it is through the chamber and through a lot of the stuff that Deanna and a lot of the committees have done. So it does work, and we're seeing that.
Sorry.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, I have a question. If there's a committee that has the members has the legislator that represent your district, should you just write to her or him? If you don't get a response, should you write to everyone in the commission, or you should write to the chair of the committee? How do you suggest to approach?
Yeah, I can kind of go into that. I think Deanna probably has a better answer for that than I do. But yeah, I think whatever access you think works can work. Again, as long as the message is right, they need to hear your voice. So if it's not necessarily somebody on a committee or chairing a committee that represents you directly, they're still there to hear the voice of anything that goes through their committee. They're listening to the people that affects across the state. So I would say absolutely yes.
The only thing I would add to that, and I know Andy's going to cover this much better than I, but if you're concerned about a particular bill, it's great to start with where that committee, where that bill sits in terms of what committee, and to really send out your message to those folks that are deliberating on whether that bill gets wings or not. And I would also CC my local representatives so that they know where your position is on that issue. But I just think that, making sure that your local reps know, and then communicating to the folks that are going to make the decision whether it's a go, no go. The one final thing I wanted to add about the effort with the commercial property fund was the most compelling part that of this conversation and the group that we pulled together was their personal stories. The fact that they've been in our communities, that these are folks that want to help their tenants, and the legislators really, really were compelled by that. So never underestimate your personal story, and don't think that they know how a particular bill will impact your business. They don't. That's your job, is to tell them. Most of our legislators have not owned small businesses, so they don't know how it's going to impact. And so you have to really paint the picture for them so that they understand the impact on your business. So when they vote to do something that you've told them will harm their business, they can't say, well, I didn't know, right? And then once you tell them and they vote to support something that's going to harm your business, now's your opportunity to hold them accountable. And with that, are we moving on to Andy, Josh? Any final questions for Josh? All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Great job. Thank you. All right. Now we're going to pivot to Andy Smith, who is a government relations manager for the city of Hillsboro. And he's an attorney. So when I get bills that I don't understand, because I'm like reading through it and it looks like a bunch of legalese, I send it to Andy and say, like, if this was in the English language, what would it say? And he tells me. So Andy, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, and great presentation, Josh. And I'll also, through looking at OLIS, try and show you all how to translate what the bill says out of legalese and into just common words that everybody understands, because that information is on OLIS as well. So I'm going to try and go through the key functions of OLIS relatively quickly. I'm going to caveat this by saying that I don't have an organized presentation like Josh, and I actually think in order to, there would be a really thoughtful way to work through all of OLIS's functions, because it's very broad. And so I think, an organized presentation is good, and I'll actually give you a resource at the end of this that you can go to if you really want to dive in and spend some time on YouTube looking at it, because there's a good presentation there as well. But OLIS is the Oregon Legislative Information System, and it was developed in order to essentially take all of the paperwork that goes along with the legislative process online and make it available to the public. And I've used a number of different bill tracking systems over the 10 years I've been doing this work. Lobbyists pay, a good chunk of change to use specific bill tracking systems, and they have their functions for if you're doing this professionally. But at the end of the day, I use OLIS myself almost exclusively to track the legislative process. And it's very straightforward and easy to use, and is highly functional, which is, when you're talking about a government developed IT project, that's not always the case. But this is a success story, I think. So I'm going to try and share my screen. I also have sort of limited technology in my house, and so I'm hoping I can see things and show you and share my screen all at the same time. All right, are you all able to see okay. So what you see before you is the Oregon State Legislature's homepage. This is not OLIS. This is where you access OLIS. So there's good information on this page too, and you can see some of the things here. A lot of these links are going to take you directly into OLIS anyway, but I'm just going to go into OLIS and open it up with this link. And so this takes you to the home page of OLIS. And so what I thought I'd show you first is just how to find out who your legislator is. Show you what the committees look like and where to access those. So there's a tab up here in the right-hand side called committees. And all the work in the Oregon legislative process happens in committees. So there's a nice drop-down menu, Senate, House, and then joint committees. And so if you click the drop-down menu, you can see all of the committees and that are Senate-only committees. The same is true for the House and joint committees. But if you open one of them, so let's say Housing and Development, it will take you to the committees page where it shows you who the members are, chair, vice chair, and the members. You can click on their individual links if you want to go to their specific information about and how to contact them as individual legislators directly. And then on the right-hand side, you can see all of their committee dates. So this goes all the way back to the first meeting of the legislative session, and then all the way up until their most current scheduled meeting. So I think today's March 3rd. So I think this committee's next meeting is scheduled for March 4th. If you drop down, it will show you what bills are on their agenda for that day. And so by finding your individual legislator, you can also see the committees that they are listed on. I'm not going to navigate back to that first page with the Oregon State Legislature's website, but there's a tab at the top that says House and the tab that says Senate, you can drop down and see all of the members. And if you click on their names, it'll tell you what committees they're on. So that will give you an idea there as well. Tracking bills and learning more information about them. First of all, if you click on session here and you drop down, you'll see all the previous sessions as well. but if you're in a legislative session like we are right now, if you click on today, that'll take you back to this, basically what is happening in the legislature today. Maybe it's actually just worth spending a little bit of time on this page just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So meetings today, drop it down, it'll show you all of the committees that are meeting and what time they're meeting. This little icon here at the end of each one is their specific agenda. So if you click on it, it will again go to their page. When it's the actual day of the meeting, it will show you what is on their agenda. When you see Senate third readings and House third readings, that means when a bill is actually going to be voted on the floor of the House or Senate. And so if you drop it down, there's not any items to display because they're not voting on bills yet. Second readings are after a bill comes out of committee, and then it is going to be second read. That's just another step in the process. It just shows you the advancement of the legislative calendar. And then first readings, these are bills that are being introduced. So this is what the Senate has planned to introduce today. That's a lot of bills that have not been introduced yet that are. I'm sure if you go to the House, you will see something quite similar to what I just showed you in the Senate. Committee reports. I would say these are not as probably valuable for the average follower of the legislative process, but it's where you can get additional information on specific bills. Sometimes you can find people's explanations of votes and things of that nature coming out of committee. I'll also note that up here, you can see that the Senate convenes at 11 o'clock today on the floor. There's a camera icon. You can click on that and you can watch the live stream of them introducing all of those bills. And you'll get the catch line when they read it. So you can kind of indicate, if it's relating to small businesses, that might be one that you want to dig into further based on the catch line. So I thought I'd show you sort of using a specific bill as an example, and it's one, I'll just use one that Deanna mentioned because the first public hearing anyway happened yesterday. But if I click on bills, it'll bring down this drop-down menu, and you can search a bill by its bill number, which is the most straightforward way, I think, to search things. But if you're doing research, sometimes you don't know the bill number, but you know the topic or a specific word, for example, and you can search by the bill text. Or you can go to bill sponsor and you can essentially look at every bill that a legislator has introduced. So maybe I'll show you Representative McLean. So if you scroll down to Representative McLean, you do the drop-down menu, you can see bills she's chief sponsoring. So these are really her bills that she's leading on if she's the chief sponsor. She's got, a respectably sized list, but not overly sized for a long legislative session. And then when other bills that she's sponsoring, again, doesn't look like she's signed on to that many bills. These are usually bills that somebody else has introduced that she likes and has been asked to sign on to, and so she did. But that's a way you can see specifically what bills any particular legislator is signed on to. But if you go back to this bills tab, I'm just going to type in Senate bill. I'm going to type in 330. Oops, got to go to bill number. And then, it brings you up a list of anything that includes 330, but Senate Bill 330, just to use as an example. So this is the place that you can get specific information about a specific bill. So right now we have the page up for Senate Bill 330. It shows you the overview, which is where we are at now. And the overview will show you who the chief sponsors, regular sponsors. It will show you the title and the catch line of the bill. You can access professional staff information, which I'll talk about a little more in a minute. It also shows you the future of this bill. So some bills only go to a policy committee. And right now, this bill is in the Senate Committee on Housing and Development, its current committee. Sometimes they leave a policy committee and they go directly to the floor, and that's how most bills go. This bill is dealing with the policy itself, and it's also a tax credit. So it has a subsequent referral, meaning that after this committee votes on it, it will have to go to the Joint Committee on Tax Expenditures, where they will evaluate the revenue impacts to the state before it can go to the floors. So that's sort of the next procedural step. You can see right here if there's a subsequent referral. And then you can look at the measure history, and it'll just show you when it was introduced. It'll show you where it was referred, and it'll show you that it had a public hearing on March 2nd, yesterday. So when the committee votes or takes further action on this, it'll populate with the measure history and tell you what the current step is in the process. So you can always look down. The most recent entry is where it's at on that particular day.
Andy, can I just ask a question there?
You bet.
So where it says public hearing held, and it's obviously a link that goes out, that links you back to all the public testimony that was given. Is that correct?
It doesn't, it can, but an easier, more straightforward way to access it is if you're on this page where you're in the bill itself, then all of that information is up here at the top. So you can access the bill text either by clicking on this link, or you can access the bill text in this drop-down menu. And sometimes the easiest way to get the text is just to click this, but when most bills, if they're moving along in the process, will be amended at some point. And so if this drop-down menu will show you the introduced version and then any amended versions that are subsequent to that. So if they adopt amendments to Senate Bill 330, they will be engrossed and it will be Senate Bill 330A. And then Senate Bill 330A will be available on this drop-down menu along with the introduced version. So you can see how the bill, where it started to where it's at with amendments as it's being engrossed. If you click on analysis, now this is where you can get the legalese broken down into English. And this is really important because these documents down here will actually tell you what the bill is. And I'll try and just bring it up and show you. This tells you what the measure does, and it gives you some background on the measure itself. And these will probably get longer, and they'll update them when amendments are incorporated into the bill to tell you most recently what it does. But it's a much, much easier way to access that information rather than trying to read the bill itself in the text. So now I'm going to try and get out of the, okay, give me just a minute to get back to OLIS here.
I think that the one thing I wanted to point out was that just to remind all of our participants that when they testify before the legislature, that's a public document or a public recording, so anybody can access it. So just keep that in mind.
That's a good point. And I'll show you that if you click on this tab up here that says testimony, this is where all your testimony shows up that's written, right? So you can see there was a bunch of testimony introduced. I'll show you how to also submit testimony and then watch the recording as well, which I think is important. So to submit testimony, you do it at the committee's homepage. So I'm back on the Housing and Development Committee, which is where Senate Bill 330 was heard. As you can see, there's down here, it says, click to submit testimony. And so if you click on that, this is new this year with the virtual process, but it's pretty straightforward. Right now, there's nothing, there's no bills to submit because the record's closed, I think, from the last hearing, but there would be, below where no measures available for testimony is, there would be either 1 or 2 or 3 bills, however many are on their agenda. You just simply click the bill that you want to submit testimony. There's another box that says support, oppose, or neutral. You click that box, and then there's a way to either do it via email or to attach a PDF. So I didn't see an option to attach a Word document. So if you want to submit written testimony, you probably want to create a PDF, and it's simply uploading it there and then clicking submit, and then it goes and it's posted relatively quickly thereafter. And then if you want to sign up for in-person testimony, let's see. This one might be a little harder to find because usually you have to have a bill that's scheduled to do that. But it's on the same page. There's a link to sign up for in-person testimony, and it's extremely straightforward. It's basically the same process as uploading your written testimony. You enter your name, your organization, and the bill you want to testify on, and you click send, and then you get an immediate email reply with a link to the meeting. And instructions for either doing it on video through the meeting link or on a cell phone. And then it gives you some ground rules of when you're actually in the meeting, how to go about waiting your turn and things of that nature. So that's how you sign up for in-person testimony. And then the last thing I'll show you is, and then I can take any questions which might actually be the most valuable way to answer your questions. Is if OLIS is great for research. And a lot of the current issues that are around have been around in the past. And if you actually want to know some of the background, it's worth going in and looking at previous iterations of the bill. So for example, if there's a proposal to change the commercial activities tax in 2021, which I'm not sure that there is in a fundamental way anyway, you might want to go back and just look at the staff measure summaries and some of the testimony in 2019 when the commercial activities tax was established. You can do that by selecting the session of which the bill happened. So if you go into 2019, you can, using the same steps and links that I showed you before, you can find that information. You can watch the hearings that happened. They're all recorded and available. And review the testimony, and it's all in OLIS. You just make sure that you're in the correct session. That's the key. So if you're trying to find House Bill 2417 and it's that was the commercial activities tax bill, if you're in the 2021 session, you won't be able to find it because it's from the 2019 session. So always make sure that you're in the correct session for what you're looking for. So why don't I just stop there and just end by saying that Senator Johnson on her Facebook page has a YouTube video that she is co-presenting in, where it's about 45 minutes long, and she walks through OLIS. So that would be a place to get, I think, probably a better thought out, more specific presentation walking you through the Oregon Legislative Information System. I can answer any questions.
Andy, I've noticed that occasionally there'll be a public hearing for a bill and it'll say invited testimony only. Can you submit written testimony to that, or is it they're just taking verbal testimony from invitees? Yeah,
so that generally no, they won't accept written testimony. It's a little bit different if they have invited testimony for a portion of a bill and then they're opening it up to the public, but generally written testimony is when they're having a public hearing. Rather than an informational hearing, which is when you see informational testimony only, it's generally going to be an informational hearing where they're not creating a public legislative record of input from the public.
Hey, Andy, there's one, can you go to on that SB 330, can you show them there how you can click and sign up to get notified when anything changes on there? Because that has been very helpful for some of the stuff I've been tracking.
Yeah, so I believe that you do that on the Oregon State Legislature's main page, and I can try and go back there. So it's been so long since I've signed up for this, I think I'd have to find it. It's probably under citizen engagement would be my guess.
I think you can do it through the actual bill too, or through the committee page.
Yeah, you may very well be able to. I think that this is the porthole though, that you go to citizen engagement on another option anyway, to go to citizen engagement, and then it takes you to this page. And you can e-subscribe to alerts from the Capitol. I set mine up just where I get notified when every single committee posts for a public hearing or post their agenda as a way to scroll through. But I think there are options to tailor it to specific issues or specific committees as well.
Yeah,
And I
think
would just say,
you
if
can
you-
also set it up for specific reps or senators. So anything that they do, you get notified as well.
And I would just say, be careful what you sign up for. They are prolific in terms of the number of emails you will get. It's like, I'm like, what did I sign up for? It's a lot. So if you really are just tracking one bill, to Brad's point, just sign up for updates on that bill. If it's a specific committee that you're tracking, just that one. Otherwise, I mean, you're going to get quite a bit of email every single day.
That's a great point. I probably get 100 emails a day from OLIS right now. So definitely, going through this portal here, it tells you that you can sort of indicates you can tailor it. So yeah, if you're only tracking a couple things or care about a couple things, it might be best to think hard about what you click that you want to receive.
All right, folks, other questions for Andy or Josh even? Happy to open it up. And this is a great opportunity that even if you're like, I'm a little nervous about doing this, you can certainly talk about that here. And we can sort of walk you through. And again, Brad testified yesterday. He's here still today to tell us about it. So didn't kill him. And Brad, maybe just to share a little bit of that experience, what it was like, because I think there's always also a fear of, what if I get asked questions? I mean, is a committee common? Do they commonly ask questions? To me, it kind of seems like they want to get through it. They don't necessarily do a lot of follow-ups unless it's invited testimony. Then they're a little more strategic. Andy, is that about right?
Yeah, that's right. I think that, for a small business owner who's testifying, they may ask you a question about your own business, and which you could probably answer. If they say, hey, what do you think about the -2 amendments? Are you supportive with those? And, they proposed it an hour ago and you haven't read them, and you probably need, like most of us would, some analysis from experts to really understand what they mean for your business. Then I think you just say, it's totally fine to say, hey, I haven't taken a look at them yet. Happy to follow up, or, but generally I support the intent, or I oppose the intent of where we're at right now.
I would just add to, having watched 2 or 3 bills that I've been following and testifying on one, Josh's comment about these are just normal people is spot on, because, the one I was watching yesterday that I testified on, I was a little surprised at some of the senators were ill-informed or didn't even understand some of the broader concepts. So I think to be intimidated is it's up to each person. And I would say also doing it remotely is a lot different than I would assume sitting in a committee room with everyone staring at you. I mean, you basically, you sign up and then it's hurry up and wait. And you just sit there listening to testimony, waiting to hear your name. And then you go and then you're done. And, the one that I testified on yesterday, they asked questions of some people and others they didn't. And some of the senators would ask questions that were more like their way of making a point through a question rather than asking a question for information. But for the most part, when they were asking questions, they genuinely were asking legitimate questions of business owners of how is this affecting you, and what are you seeing? So they do pay attention. I've seen a lot of stuff at the federal level, and you just see these senators that seem like that they're just talking to talk, and it has not felt like that for the most part from the stuff I've paid attention to.
All right, we're getting ready to wrap up. The last thing I would say is just, oftentimes we get frustrated by the bills that are being contemplated, and we're kind of like, what could they be thinking? That's probably something you don't want to say during your testimony. Decorum is important. It's one of those things that, if you come at it from a standpoint of being really upset and rather critical, oftentimes that's when they kind of tune out. But I think telling your story and the impact on your business, in a way that's meaningful and passionate is much more a better approach to take than anger. So just always keep that in mind, that, you know, they're really interested in learning about your business, and it's your opportunity to express your passion around what you've built, right? And what they need to understand, the information you want to convey to them about how you've built your business and what impact this is going to have on your business. And, you know, and just come from it from the standpoint of they probably didn't know. And so you're providing really important information that allows them to be better legislators, because they can take that information to their colleagues. And you'll hear oftentimes, if you tell a really great, compelling story, they're going to be on the floor telling your story again to their colleagues, because that's something in their back pocket that they can pull out and use to persuade their colleagues to think about things differently. So this really a great opportunity. And yeah, there's nothing more powerful. You know, sending me down to tell your story is not nearly as impactful as you showing up to tell your own story. So I would encourage you to do that. And that was really the point of this entire session, was let's break down the barriers to engagement with your legislators and, you know, take it to that next level. Look for the opportunities. And if you need help with writing testimony or what you're going to say, you know, send it to me. I'm happy to take a look at it. And then I'll send it to Andy and Josh and say, did I do okay? But really don't be afraid of that engagement opportunity. And, you know, it's the citizens' government. And, you know, if you don't show up, they don't know. So really encouraging you to do that. Want to thank Josh and Andy for doing this. This is great information, really, really helpful. And I hope to see you on some screens in either a Senate meeting or a House meeting. Thank you all very much.